Now let's actually get into the details of the scales. I'm going to go ahead and play a scale for you to give you kind of a model of where we're going, and then we'll back out and break it down into some smaller steps. That version of the scale is called the Galamian version, and Galamian was a famous educator of the last century. Many of his students became internationally famous, and the particular unique feature of that scale is that it has a little turnaround at the beginning and also at the end. And what that little turnaround does is it makes it so that there's 48 notes in the scale, which means we can divide that 3-octave scale up into many, many different bowing patterns. We could do 4 notes, 6 notes, 8 notes, 12, 24, and practice it lots of different ways. It gives us lots of options, and we'll get to all of that later. But that's the Galamian version of the scale. And notice that it goes straight up and straight down, as we would expect for a scale. Now, in the beginning, I recommend not doing that version because as you get used to the shifts and as you get used to kind of navigating those higher realms of your fingerboard that you haven't spent as much time in, it's actually pretty easy to get distracted and lose track of where you are in the pattern. So I like to do standalone octaves in the beginning, just so that it's really clear where you are in that series of 8 notes. And then once you kind of get everything figured out, you map out your shifts, you map out your fingerboard, then you can take out those artificial divisions between the octaves and go straight up and straight down. So here is what the standalone octave version of the scale sounds like, and I'll go ahead and do separate bows on this one. The standalone octave pattern of the scale is pretty useful for major. It's even more useful for minor because we're going to be doing melodic minor, which has a raised 6th and 7th scale degree on the way up and a lowered 6th and 7th scale degree on the way down. And that can get pretty confusing, especially in the higher octave of the scale where you haven't spent as much time. So you're going to want to spend longer on the standalone octave pattern for minor than you would on major. So let's just take a moment and review what the melodic minor scale pattern is. And we'll do it just on a single octave. Let's take G minor as an example. We're going to have E natural and F sharp on the way up. And then going down, we're going to return to the version of those notes that's actually in the key signature. And that would be F natural and E flat. And so here is that melodic minor scale. And as your first step, I would actually go ahead and do that single octave version on each of the octaves of your 3-octave scale. So here's the 2nd octave. I'll find my note for the 3rd octave. And you might want to do, that 2nd octave actually has a shift. You're shifting to an E natural. You'll probably want to do that octave a handful of times before you go to this 3rd octave that I'm about to do. And of course, that's going to be your hardest octave, and you'll want to spend a little longer doing some reps on just that octave alone. And then once you've kind of mastered each of those individual segments, now you're ready to put them together into the standalone version. Let's say that you've now done your standalone octave preparation on one of your scales and you're now ready to do the Galamian version. We already mentioned that the Galamian version has a turnaround at the beginning and the end, and that gives you 48 notes, and that's evenly divisible by a bunch of things. Here's what you're going to do with that. You're going to play initially 4 notes per bow. That's a very moderate speed. At 6 notes per bow, if you keep the same beat, that's just a hair faster. 8 notes per bow, again, just a little faster, still pretty manageable. But with each incremental increase in the number of notes per bow, you're also going a little fast. And so by the time you get up to 24, you're going at a very advanced speed. So here's an example of what that's going to look like. And I like to do at least one of these acceleration patterns and maybe a few acceleration patterns in each of my practice. It's basically going to train my left hand to really be fluid and facile with the scale. I'm going to, the range of tempos that you could probably do this at are from about 50 to 66. If you're planning to go all the way up to 24 per bow, you're probably going to want to be down around 50. But if you know that you're not going to make it all the way till up to 24 per bow, then you can choose a more moderate tempo. I'm going to go ahead and dial in around 60 for the purposes of demonstration. So here's 4 per bow. I already showed you this speed earlier. And you can think of this as being 8th notes. Our next speed you can think of as being triplet 8th notes. This is 6 per bow. And notice that I'm still at the speed vibrating every single note. It's possible to do that at a 6-note speed. Here's 8, so this would be 16th notes. Getting vibrato here and there on this particular speed. And now I'm up to 12, which is going to be sextuplets, right? So think of it as being triplet 16th notes. Now I'm at 16. That divides into 48 3 times, which is an odd number, which means that by the time I get to the end of the scale, I'm going to be at the tip of the bow. So if I'm going straight through the series, I'm probably going to do this particular, the 16-note version, twice, and then that puts me back on a down bow for my final scale. And here's 24, which is going to be another triplet pattern. And there you go. You can see it kind of works you into that very high speed by allowing you to get used to the lower speeds and kind of train and refresh your left hand each practice. As you begin to work in earnest on your 3-octave scales, a good strategy for your practice would be to say do 4 major and 4 minor scales each practice, and then choose 2 of those to do an acceleration pattern. And that's going to give you a good bulk of work to where you're really starting to see some results, you're picking up some speed, and then just make sure that every few days you're adding a new unfamiliar scale onto the ones that you're already starting to get good at, so that you're really working your way down through that list. I have provided a suggested order of scales, and the ones that we're going to start with are the ones that have more of the ringtones. They're in, more accessible keys. So it's not necessarily that they're lower on the fingerboard. Some of the scales that are perhaps higher on the fingerboard still have lots of ringtones that can really help you navigate, and then circling back around to some of those more gnarly keys. And the most difficult keys are a couple of the minor ones, and it's going to take you a much longer time to master those, and that's okay. Where we ultimately want to go is that we can play all of the keys in series connected together at a very fast speed. And this is what it looks like to connect them all together. You'll see that for example, the G scale joins seamlessly with the next scale in the series, which is A flat. Here's what that looks like. And notice that I'm going to do each scale in its major and minor version. I won't go all the way through the series. And that gives you the idea. So that's it. Have fun. Do your best playing. Use scales to work on every aspect of your technique. Really bring your best quality focus and highest level musical ideas to your scales, because if you can play your scales at the level that you want to play your concert music, that's going to really set you up for an extraordinary practice.